So now let's move to our next set of speakers, Nathalie and Mark from the National Centre for the Replacement, Refinement and Reduction of Animals in Research. Nathalie is Head of Experimental Design and Reporting at NC3Rs, has been there since 2010, and leads the organisation's work on improving the design of animal research and its reporting in scientific publications, both in the research that the organisation funds and elsewhere. Mark is Director of Policy and Outreach at NC3Rs. He's worked since the Centre was established in 2004 and provides strategic oversight of the Centre's relationships with the academic community and beyond. Thank you very much. Lovely to have you with us here today.
Thank you, James, for the introduction, and hello, everyone. Nathalie and I are delighted to have the opportunity to speak to you about research culture and the 3 Rs. We're aware we have a broad audience today, so we'll begin with some background on animal research and the 3 Rs before turning to the National Centre and how our work helps to support a research culture that delivers reproducible and ethical science. So first, to provide some context, animals have been used in scientific research for centuries, and they've contributed to many of the medical advances we now take for granted, including vaccines, antibiotics, anesthetics, and treatments for conditions such as diabetes and high blood pressure. And animals continue to be used today, with around 3 million used in Great Britain each year and many millions more worldwide in basic research to generate new scientific knowledge, some of which may include better understanding of how the different tissues and organs of the body work when healthy and diseased. Throughout the drug discovery and development process to support decisions on which drugs are safe and efficacious and can be used in humans, to test commonly used chemical products to assure they're safe for animals, humans, and the environment. And just as animals are used to understand human health and disease, they're also used for studying animal diseases and in the development of veterinary products. So, despite the benefits and advantages that have come from animal research and will continue to do so, it remains one of the most contentious and complex areas of science. And this goes beyond the ethical issue of causing harm to animals for human benefit. It also includes matters relating to research culture and research integrity. It remains an area of high public concern. Every couple of years, MORI conducts a poll of public attitudes to animal research, which highlights that around 2/3 of the British public can accept animal research for medical purposes, but support is falling and it's conditional on the 3 Rs being applied. And something that Nathalie will talk about later are concerns regarding whether animal studies are appropriately designed and reproducible, and the impact that this has on the quality of the scientific output, how reliable the findings are, and the numbers of animals used. And finally, the scientific validity of animal models and how well they translate to humans is another area of concern, and one that regularly appears in journals and the scientific press. And there are now even whole Twitter accounts dedicated to calling out hype in reporting of results generated in animals. So the 3 Rs gives us a mechanism to try and address these concerns by providing a framework for critiquing the utility of animal models, for designing appropriate animal studies, and for responding to societal concerns about animal research. They're not a new concept, first proposed in 1959 and since embedded in legislation on the use of animals for scientific purposes. Replacement refers to avoiding or replacing the use of animals in areas where they would otherwise have been used. Reduction is minimizing the number of animals consistent with the scientific aims of the project. And refinement is about minimizing any pain and distress that the animal subjects might experience throughout their lifetime. Now, despite the regulatory framework and the obvious ethical drivers for the 3Rs, they are not implemented as fully as they might be. And this is a serious issue because there are many ways in which the 3Rs benefit science and support a good research culture. And our contemporary definitions illustrate this. For example, replacement refers to accelerating the use of models and tools that are based on the very latest science and technologies, which are often more physiologically and translationally relevant. So historically, there's been little activity from the scientific community on the 3Rs, and NC3Rs' role is to change that, to accelerate the development and the uptake of the 3Rs. And we've developed a strategy which includes funding research and innovation to develop new 3Rs opportunities, plus a large program of in-house activities led by our own staff and aimed at driving changes in policy practice and regulations. We work internationally with academia, industry, regulators and funders, and our remit is very broad. We're funded mainly by the MRC and BBSRC and supported by an independent non-executive board. So the in-house programs span many different areas such as experimental design and animal welfare, and they aim to tackle some of the behavioural and cultural barriers that impede progress in the 3Rs, giving rise to what we've termed the 3Rs Valley of Death, where existing validated 3Rs techniques are not being applied to their fullest extent. There are common challenges that span the programme, such as a lack of awareness of the need for change or the rationale for change being poorly understood. Another issue is endorsement of the 3Rs, but limited change in practice. And there can be huge inertia in the regulatory sciences, for instance, because of risk aversion, owing to the need to ensure protection of human health and the very serious consequences of getting this wrong. But this can lead to a tendency to prefer historical practices and means it can take a long time to adopt change. So what I'm saying is that research culture, i.e. the actions and behaviours of individuals and the values and ethos of institutions, can have a significant impact on effective application of the 3Rs and the humane use of animals. And as an organisation, NC3Rs is committed to improving research culture and facilitating an environment that supports reproducible and ethical science. And one of the ways we've done this is by producing a range of resources which many individuals and institutions are using to improve or strengthen their 3Rs research culture. And these are pulled together in a dedicated hub on our website. And they focus on experimental design, rigor and reporting, open research and communication, and promoting a culture of care. And I'll now hand over to Nathalie, who will highlight some of the resources and expand on the issues that led to their development.
Right, thank you, Mark. So I will start by providing examples of what we do to promote reliable, reproducible, and rigorous research. So considering the sensitivity of animal research and the ethical and societal concerns with it, you would hope that animal experiments are carefully designed and transparently reported to ensure that the results are reliable and that they all add to the knowledge base and contribute to scientific progress. But unfortunately, the reality is quite different. Many scientists and organizations are concerned about the quality and the reproducibility of animal research, and these are just a few of the headlines from the last few years. Some are talking about a reproducibility crisis, and this movement was given a lot of momentum about 10 years ago when the pharmaceutical industry reported that they could not reproduce most of what was published in the scientific literature. And this is something that we are concerned about at the NC3Rs, because if studies do not yield reliable results, they can't add to the evidence base and waste of animals. And there are many factors that contribute to the poor reproducibility of animal research. The main ones are that there is not enough rigor in the study design and data analysis, which means that the results are often unreliable. And when experiments are published in the scientific literature, there are not enough information to allow others to repeat the methods that have been used or to assess whether the results can be trusted. And this has a massive impact on scientific progress. It's very common to see treatments that worked in animal models fail at the clinical trial stage because they're actually not effective or because they're harmful. And it also has an impact on resources. It's estimated that half of all preclinical research is not reproducible. So in the US, the budget for preclinical research is $56 billion per year. So 28 billion a year are wasted in the US only. And if you apply this estimation to research done in the UK, this could mean a waste of 1.6 million animals every year. And in the UK and in most of the world, the authorization for animal experiments is based on a harm-benefit analysis. So the harms to the animals, those that are inherent to the transport and housing or a consequence of the scientific procedures that they receive, are weighted against the likely benefits to science and society, such as new scientific knowledge or improvement in human or veterinary health. But if the findings of the research are not reliable, or the research is not reported in enough details, these benefits cannot be realized and the research is simply unethical. So in a rigorous study design, you would expect that a number of measures are used to reduce the risk of subjective bias. So just to give an example, one measure that can reduce the risk of bias is blinding, so that investigators don't know what experimental intervention the animals have received, and they can remain objective. And this study is over 50 years old, but it really demonstrates why blinding is important. This experiment was carried out on two populations of rats, one described as bright rats, and the other described as dull rats. And the rats were put through a memory test, a TMAS, which had a white and a dark arm. So during the training phase, rats would learn to go to the dark side, and they would get a food reward when they met a correct term. Then the experiment was carried out over several days, and the researchers counted the number of correct turns to the dark arm. So as you can see on the graph, the bright rats did significantly better than the dull rats. They started off better, and they improved further over the course of the experiment. The thing is, the experiment was not performed on the rats, it was actually performed on the researchers. And there was actually no difference between the two populations of rats. They had been labeled bright or dull randomly in the morning of the experiment. The only difference between the two populations of rats were in the minds and the expectations of the researchers who ran the experiments. The rats in the bright group were perceived as brighter, cleaner, tamer, and more pleasant to work with than the rats in the dull group. And researchers working with bright rats described their own behavior as more relaxed and casual. So these differences on the graph here are actually due to differences in researchers' behavior towards the rat rather than the rats themselves. And that's why blinding is extremely important, because if researchers are not blinded, they can unconsciously influence the results. And the example I've just shown is very nice, but it has real life consequences. In experiments in animals looking at the effect of a new drug, for example, unconscious bias by the researchers will lead to another estimation of the treatment efficacy, and the treatment may be taken to clinical trial when it should not have been. So the NTTRs is doing a lot to address this and improve the quality of animal experiments. And this is an example of a tool that we developed and launched 5 years ago called the Experimental Design Assistant. So this is an online system to help researchers design in vivo experiments. And it's a very clever system which acts like your own personal statistical assistant. So researchers can design experiments in the system, and the system uses computer-based logical reasoning to provide bespoke advice and feedback on the experimental plan and the statistical analysis. So it provides dedicated support for randomization, blinding, and power calculation. It's helping researchers design experiments as robust, as rigorous as possible, using the minimum number of animals that they need, and addressing sources of bias with randomization and blinding to ensure that the results are reliable and reproducible. So it provides transparency also for those involved in reviewing these experiments. And another resource that we've developed is the ARRIVE guidelines, which set out the minimum information that should be reported in scientific publications describing animal research. So these guidelines have been established as an international standard over the last 10 years, and they promote complete and transparent reporting to enable researchers and reviewers to scrutinize the research adequately, evaluate its methodological rigor, and reproduce the methods and findings. And a point that I'd like to make is that it's very important that the development of resources like the ARIVE guidelines is collaborative and inclusive. If we set an international standard, it has to work for the entire scientific community of animal researchers. So we recently updated the guidelines and published ARIVE 2.0 last summer. And this project had input from the scientific community carefully built into the process. It was undertaken by an international working group with expertise from across the life sciences community, including funders, journal editors, statisticians, methodologists, and researchers from academia and industry. We also used a Delphi exercise with external stakeholders to maximize diversity in field of expertise and geographical locations, with experts from 19 countries providing input. And we also published the revised guidelines as a preprint and conducted formal road testing with researchers preparing manuscripts to ensure that the guidelines are well understood and useful to the intended users. And obviously, we also considered other reporting standards as part of the revision to ensure that we didn't provide conflicting advice, which would have been confusing to researchers. So ARIVE 2.0 are compatible with other guidelines that have been published in recent years. And because they provide a comprehensive set of recommendations that are specifically tailored to the description of in vivo research, using the ARIVE guidelines to write a manuscript actually helps authors comply with more general requirements and journal policies. And our experimental design and reporting resources are endorsed by many of the major stakeholders in scientific research. So for example, over 1,000 journals recommend the ARIVE guidelines in the instruction to authors. And many major funding organizations recommend that researchers use the experimental design assistant when preparing a grant application that contains animal research. So that includes the MRC or the Wellcome Trust in the UK, but also funded in Europe or in the US, like the NIH. And there is also grassroots support from the researchers themselves. The experimental design assistant has over 10,000 registered users. And over the past few years, we've had 40,000 requests for printed copies of the guidelines, the ARIVE guidelines, from 50 different countries. So that brings me to the work that we do around open research and communication. So we are supporting researchers to describe the research in a comprehensive and transparent manner. But to ensure that the research realizes its full potential, it has to be accessible. So we encourage open science approaches, and NCQS grant holders are expected to publish their work in a freely accessible platform to maximize reuse and amplify the benefits of the research. And that's in line with UKRI's policy on open science. And we obviously apply the same standards to ourselves, and all publications from NCQS staff are also published open access. And to really maximize the dissemination and uptake of methods that reduce the use of animals in research or improve their welfare, we also have our own open access publication platform called the NCQS Gateway. We created the Gateway to enable our grant holders to promote the 3Rs approaches that they develop with our funding, and crucially, describe the methodology in enough detail so that they can be replicated in other labs. So this will maximize the uptake of those new and improved methods to ensure an impact on a national and international scale, rather than just being restricted to the researchers and their collaborators. So our Gateway is run by F1000 Research, which is one of the publishers with the highest standards of transparency, with rapid publication and open peer review after the article has been published. And as a research funder, we also have a responsibility to ensure that our decision-making processes are fair and transparent. So we are a signatory of DORA, the San Francisco Declaration of Research Assessment, and we actively apply its recommendations. We also make information about our funding schemes publicly available. So that includes the assessment criteria for all our grant schemes, the success rates for the schemes as well, the membership of our funding panels, and diversity across our funding portfolio. We're also transparent about what we have funded, and each award has a dedicated page on the NCQS websites where we have summarized the aims of the research and its key impacts, and we also provide links to scientific publications. And as Mark mentioned at the beginning of this talk, animal research is an issue that the public is concerned about, and it's really important to communicate the research that is being done under 3Rs. So to start with, our website includes information tailored to a lay audience on the use of animals in research under 3Rs. And we also offer awards of up to £1,500 to support NT3R's funded researchers to engage the public with the approaches being taken to replace, reduce, and refine the use of animals in science. So the awards can fund the development of almost any type of event or activity aimed at the public. It could be things like an online engagement activity, like a video, or a hands-on workshop, or a school visit. And each year we sponsor events as part of Pint of Science, which is an annual festival that invites researchers into pubs and cafes around the world to speak to the public about what they do. And each year we showcase the work of NT3R's grant holders in different cities in the UK. We're also a signatory of the Concordat on Openness on Animal Research, which is a set of commitments for UK-based life science organizations to enhance the animal research communications. And our commitment to the Concordat was recognized last year with an Openness Award for a citizen science project, Secret Lives of Mice. So this is a project in collaboration with the Genetics Research Institute, MRC Harwell, to develop a system that can analyze mice behavior automatically in the home cage environment. So that offers major animal welfare and scientific benefits because it allows researchers to obtain behavioral data without disturbing the animals or removing them from their social groups. But training that system to recognize specific behaviors like eating or grooming requires a lot of data. So we harness the power of citizen science to recruit volunteers to help us. And over 6,600 volunteers contributed to that project, which is amazing. And importantly, the project also enabled us to open a dialogue between the researchers and the public about animal research and about the 3Rs and the importance of developing a better understanding of mouse behavior. So the success of Secret Lives of Mice paves the way for more citizen science projects that highlight the importance of the 3Rs in producing better science. And with that, I'll hand over back to Mark.
Thanks, Natalie. So finally, to a culture of care. What does this mean in the context of animal research? Well, generally, it encompasses a commitment to treat animals with compassion and respect, but also to improve scientific quality, care of staff, and transparency with stakeholders. I like this comment from the Brown report, which emphasizes that a healthy culture of care requires a shift away from merely responding to externally imposed standards, such as those in legislation, to one in which leaders and frontline staff actively commit to improving the 3Rs, animal welfare and research, and work together to do so. Now, the Brown Committee was convened to independently review animal research at Imperial College following an expose by an anti-vivisection organisation. Imperial's made many changes, but its experiences at the time and the findings of the Brown report illustrate to all research organisations breeding and using animals the importance of establishing and maintaining a good culture of care. At the institutional level, a number of individuals and roles have responsibility for culture of care and ensuring that there is the infrastructure and knowledge and training to put the 3Rs into practice. So in the Animal House, it's about ensuring the latest research and technological developments in animal use and welfare are utilised, that staff are trained and empowered to achieve this, and that there's a willingness to change practice. And in the lab, a culture of care would also encompass selecting the right models and designs which optimize animal use and well-being, and reporting studies comprehensively and transparently. And at the most senior level, in the VC's office, for example, it's about leadership, setting the right standards and tone, fostering good teamwork, respect and communication, and in some cases being willing to say no. You know, for example, we won't do that at this institution, or those behaviours are not acceptable. So the NC3Rs provides a huge range of 3Rs resources, from publications to websites and events, to support a culture of care and encourage the responsible and compassionate and humane use of animals in research, which is a key feature of a positive research culture. Our webinar series is proving very popular as a means for research and technical staff to stay up to date with the latest in the 3Rs and to develop or refresh their knowledge during lockdown. And the schedule and recordings can be found on our webinars page. We also provide a series of e-learning modules for training and CPD in areas such as assessing animal pain and distress or euthanasia and aspects of anesthesia. As a research funder ourselves, we recognise the very important role that funding bodies have to play in fostering a good research culture as applied to the use of animals. And we work with other funders to embed the 3Rs in their policies and practices. For example, through the development of guidelines which set out our collective expectations and principles for good practice in animal research, which are then adopted as a condition of research funding. Many of these are referred to in UKRIO's primer on integrity in research involving animals, and also in UKRI's new Good Research Resource Hub. Since 2004, we've also provided a peer review and advice service, and this is now utilised by 28 funding bodies internationally. We review research proposals submitted to them involving the use of sensitive species, such as non-human primates, cats, dogs, and equines. Our expert 3Rs review and the advice that we give to funding panels complements the reviews of the scientific referees and helps to enhance the quality of the science, animal welfare, and protect the funder's reputation, ensuring that the high standards that they expect are implemented in practice, including for animal research conducted overseas. To further encourage a culture and behaviours that accelerate the uptake of the 3Rs, we've taken the bold step of appointing regional programme managers, and these provide dedicated on-the-ground support to universities and other research institutions. The posts are co-funded by the NC3Rs and the University Consortia, and the collaborations are going fantastically well. Now, the support provided can involve anything from fostering engagement in the 3Rs across the institution, advising on research funding opportunities, participating in the ethics committee, and organising workshops targeted to local training needs, such as good experimental design, for example. In the UK, a series of licenses is required before a researcher can use animals in scientific procedures, including a licence for the project itself. And the regional managers typically provide bespoke advice to project licence applicants to help them address the 3Rs aspects of the licence application. And general lessons from their experiences of doing this, together with resources from the NC3Rs and others that can help with the application process, have been pulled together in a web page and PDF on our website. There's advice on searching for replacement models, tips on experimental design and reporting, and links to identify the very latest refinements. And I'd recommend that all project licensees take a look. And finally, one more key resource from the NC3Rs, which can really help with developing a good culture which supports the 3Rs. Working with an expert group, we've developed 2 3Rs self-assessment tools, which enable research groups and research institutions to track, evaluate, and benchmark their 3Rs activities and progress. Once an account is created, users complete a questionnaire and receive scores and feedback with suggestions for further improving their 3Rs culture. Now, the tools are free to use, all data is confidential to the user and held securely. And we encourage you to register at the link shown on the slide. And the self-assessment process can be used to identify priority areas to focus on at your institution, to track improvements over time, and to demonstrate your commitment to the 3 Rs. The Research Institution tool assesses the organisation as a whole, providing scores and feedback across 6 key dimensions. Now, it should be completed by a senior individual, typically with support from the local ethics committee. And in this dummy example, you can see the institution scored quite poorly on the people dimension. And the suggestions for improvement include considering things like recognising and rewarding staff for 3 Rs developments, hosting an institutional 3 Rs symposium, and suggestions for how to foster a culture of care. So I hope you can see how the 3 Rs both support and are contingent upon a good research culture, and that the NC3Rs provides a wealth of practical resources to support individuals and institutions to improve their research culture. And the benefits of this are manifold, including more efficient and impactful science, better animal welfare, improved public confidence, and a better workplace environment. So thank you for listening, and to UKRIO for organising this event. And Nathalie and I would be happy to take any questions now and in the panel Q&A later.
Nathalie and Mark, thank you so much. That was fascinating. We've already had a lot of questions coming, so we'll do 1 or 2 now and then address more in the panel discussion later. The first question is, what are your views on working with other countries that do not comply with UK animal research standards? So when the work is conducted with animals is conducted abroad, analysed and utilised in UK research organisations?
Yes, I think this is a difficult one. I think there are some, real and serious issues relating to, for example, lower animal welfare standards at some facilities, not all, but at some, in some overseas countries, or lower awareness of good practice in terms of, experimental design and reporting. So there are definite issues here. I mean, I think one of the difficulties is, having used animals and gained potentially useful information, you could say that it is unethical not to, use that information if it's reliable, and perhaps those experiments having to be repeated. So I think it's, you need careful judgments, and I think they need to be made case by case around the particular research and the particular circumstances in which, those data were obtained.
Thank you.
I don't know if Nathalie has anything to...
Yeah, I think, I'd like to add that, so in the program of work on experimental design and reporting, I think that highlights the importance of working internationally, and we're making sure that all the resources that we developed are, freely available, they can be accessible across the globe. And we work really hard actually with, learned societies abroad to make sure that these resources are disseminated and can be accessible to people that might not have the same level of support that we have in the UK, basically. Another thing that we've done is we've worked really hard to translate our resources. So the RIVE guidelines, for example, are available in 10 different languages at the minute. And as part of the experimental design assistant also is being translated. We've been in discussion with people in China to translate it in Chinese, for example. So I think it just highlights the importance of making these resources available to everyone, because the scientific community is international.
Thank you. And you just actually preempted the question. The next question was going to be about, could you say a bit about your work on international collaborations to improve standards globally, but I think you just covered that. A question from Louise. She said it's great to have animal research being discussed more widely in this forum. She notes your programme managers only cover England and Wales. Are there plans to extend this to the rest of the UK?
Yes, there are. We'd love to have a post in Scotland, and we are working on that. So that'd be great to see that in the future. I mean, NC3Rs is a national organisation, and all of our resources are utilised not just across the UK, but internationally. But in terms of the on-the-ground support that those regional programme managers provide, yes, we'd love to work and collaborate with some Scottish institutions.